So I'm thinking, you know, at 1963, then you got 64, 65, Voting Rights Act, Civil Rights Act, Voting Rights Act. And then you fast forward for you personally, roughly 10 years or so, to 1973. And this guy named Maynard Jackson is getting elected mayor.
Pretty cool. Cool.
So talk to us about that 10 years. What was that night like? Right? Like actual election night.
Well, it's pretty exciting because I met Maynard Jackson in Talladega when I was teaching.
Okay.
He came over to speak to a history class
Yep.
in 1969, 1970.
Mm-hmm.
And he spoke to this class in Alabama in Talladega College. And one of my friends was a professor, and he invited some of us, and I sat in that. And there were several rallies in Alabama, in Talladega, around voting rights.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in Alabama from 69 to 71. And so I was involved somewhat with that and encouraged my students to be involved if they were interested. But, so I moved to Atlanta in 1970, January, February 72. And Andy is running for Congress.
Mm-hmm.
So I was a full-time volunteer in Andy Young's congressional campaign. And a lot of people wonder, you know, well, what do? You must have been giving policy advice and all that. No. I was on the street. I was on the street crew.
Okay.
And my assignment was about a mile from here on Abernathy. There was a Kmart there.
Uh-huh.
And I would be dropped off. I didn't drive much at the time. I would be dropped off in the morning, and I would stand in that parking lot and speak to everybody who would talk to me about the importance of voting in elections. And listen to them.
Yeah.
And they'd drop off lunch sometimes when they remembered I was there. And then I got involved in fundraising. So by the time the next year now, Maynard was running.
Mm-hmm.
And Andy and Maynard kind of joined forces.
Mm-hmm.
For Maynard's election.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the same people I'd worked with, Stony Cooks, Julius Hollis,
Mm-hmm.
Martin Cook, John Cox, just some of the same people I'd worked with for Andy's campaign,
Mm-hmm.
all descended back on Atlanta to get Maynard elected. And Pearl Clegg and I were left in charge of the office the night of the election.
You didn't get to go to the party?
I did not get to go to the party.
Oh, wow.
And the theory was that she and I would be able to answer all of the incoming press questions that were coming in from across the country.
Uh-huh.
So they literally locked the doors and left us in the downtown office. The office was in the area now of Georgia State, right at Centennial Park. It's Woodruff Park, I think it is now, but it was right up where the law school is, in that area. And where Georgia State is, right on the edge of the park in downtown. And they locked the doors and said, we'll be back and get you later.
What inspired you to kind of lean in for both Andy's campaign and Maynard's campaign?
I thought we were on the way to a new South. A South where African Americans and women and people who had been locked out were going to be a part of not just politics, but the culture, the economy, and that it was a new day.
Mm-hmm.
And Maynard was very inspiring in his early 30s, and I'm very hopeful, very optimistic. Met people from all walks of life who supported both Andy and me. And I just thought we would never see the clock turn back. In other words, it seemed that we were on the course or on a path that was going to open up the society, the world of, all the aspects of it, the public, the private sector, the not-for-profit sector. There was a lot of energy, high energy, very optimistic. Really no fears. I had no fear that either Andy or Maynard would fail or do something that didn't make sense.
How did you see yourself in turn? I mean, these are two little icons, right? Like, how do you how did you work with them? What was that like? Like, how did you position yourself to have influence and get the things you wanted done?
Well, I'd say a good 75 to 80% of what I did was what they wanted to do.
Got it.
Every now and then there'd be an opportunity for me to influence. I was very much behind the scenes. And I mean, I had opinions and I expressed them, even in those days. But for the most part, I was excited about their vision and their ideas. And I would say even most of my career, I've been on the implementation side as opposed to the visioning side. And I learned to implement, to execute, you know, to do the management side, really to help them achieve some of the things they were trying to do. Maynard had an idea a minute. So, I mean, I found myself throughout my career with him just reminding him that we already were working on a dozen things. And that we didn't have the capacity to take on everything new. But he always had new ideas, always. He had, one of the things I think about is how he would have responded to technology. No telling how many.
You give him Twitter?
How many, no, not so much as opinions.
Yeah.
But how many assignments we would get,
Oh,
right?
wow. I hear it.
He wouldn't have to pick up the phone and call you or knock on your door.
Right. It's a quick text.
You wake up first thing in the morning and then would, you know, you have a list of 20 things. He was very expansive in his view and had studied urban affairs a good bit before he ran and knew the city very well, knew people in all walks of life, and he always had something new, some new idea. We used to watch him. I wasn't always in City Hall. I was at the Office of Cultural Affairs. But when you go to a press conference with Maynard, and you know, there'd be a preparation meeting, and there would be some agreement. He would lead it, but there'd be some agreement as to what the answers to the questions were, and then what the timetable was. And invariably at the press conference, he would cut the timetable back. He would say, Shirley, I need this done in 3 months. And I'd say, no way. He said, of course you can do it in 3 months. I said, you can't get citizen approval in the NPU process.
Right.
I can't do the things you put in place in 3 months. And his comeback would be, well, if the U.S. Army could do it, in other words, somebody can do it, so what's wrong with you?
Right. That's hilarious.
But that was a constant with him. He was always pushing forward, always open for new ideas, and really beloved by people from all walks of life. Andy gave you a little more leeway. He had some principles that he was wanted to be sure the employees were well compensated. He wanted them to be well compensated and treated fairly and well. He wanted everyone to understand that every person was on the team and that no position was more important than the other. So one of the principles that we had in his office was if you were standing by a phone that was ringing, regardless of your title or your background, you were obligated to answer the phone.
Nice.
And you were also obligated not to prefer the phone, but to handle whatever came up on the phone. Now, that's a big deal.
Sure.
So there was no such thing as, well, that's for the secretary or the assistant or the intern. He's very peculiar about how quickly you answer mail. We answer mail in multiple languages in Andy's administration. We found people all over city government who spoke other languages. And if Andy would sign the letter himself, then the recipient would always think it was a pen pal, and they just keep writing. So we had to get to the point where he wouldn't sign. We would answer on his behalf. But they would be in, probably in half a dozen different languages.
Wow.
So, I mean, the level of international engagement was so much higher with Andy. than during my term and during Maynard's term, although Maynard started it because Andy had been a UN ambassador and a civil rights leader and had traveled a good bit around the world and a member of Congress. He was much more engaged internationally than most mayors.